Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Nordic Welfare Center and this webinar on tactile language, the last but not the least in our webinar series. My name is Maria Kreutz, and I work with the disability field and especially with the deafblind issues at Nordic Welfare Center. Next year in April, we really do hope that we can arrange a physical course, and that will take place in Copenhagen, the 5th to 7th of April. You will also find information about that course in the chat, and the places are limited, so please hurry to get sure you can join us at this course. At Nordic Welfare Center, we coordinate and facilitate Nordic collaboration on different issues within the welfare areas. And in the deafblind issues, we have different kind of networks, projects, expert groups, and so on. One of the network is on tactile language, and for some years ago, the network started the work with putting so much knowledge that they could find for now in this book. If you can see it, you can support it. You find that book also on our website, and I really hope that you have it close to you so you can look in it whenever you want to and when you have some thoughts about tactile language. Today, we are going to listen to Rolf Mjønes from Norway. He's the author of the 6th chapter. Before I welcome him, I will correct myself because I said the network started to collect all the knowledge that they could find for now in this book, and that's not true because there was more that have been very nice to fit in the book, but then it would have been quite more thicker. But this is a start, and maybe when now we have been working with it and we have been collaborate with many of you out there, we will start the next step in the development of the knowledge of tactile language. Please feel free to contact us if you have any thoughts about it, and then we can start a discussion. There are so many questions, there are so many good thoughts among you out there when you are working, and it's very good to collaborate on this issue so we can contribute to the knowledge developing. Okay. With that said, Rolf Mjønes, I would like to welcome you. How are you?
Thank you, Maria. I'm well, thank you.
Good, that's good to hear. And I would like to start, before you start, I would like to say that there have been many participants at this webinar who have contacted me some weeks or maybe 2 months ago and asked, okay, when is the webinar with Rolf? Because this topic is very, very important for us in our daily work. So we are really looking forward to listen to you. The floor is yours, Rolf, and then in the end, we will have the questions and some comments or anything. So all your participants, just feel free to write down your questions during the webinar. Go on, Rolf, please.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk about a topic that are close to my heart. My presentation is called We Hear with Our Brains, with the subtext Audiovisual Speech Perception. I am an audiologist. I work here in Eikholt National Resource Center for the Deafblind. My specialty is hearing rehabilitation. I have been using hearing aids myself since I was 5 years old. That was sort of my way into this field. In this presentation, I hope to cover and answer 3 questions. First up, audiovisual speech perception. How is this important? Secondly, why should you care? And third, if we do care, what do we do about it? And how is this relevant to you? And to start with that question, we need to look a little bit at how common is dual sensory loss. So I work for Eikholt. We have a pretty small target group of people who are deafblind. But what I'm talking about today, the mechanisms behind audiovisual speech perception, is really something that we all benefit from. As long as we have a little bit of sight, a little bit of hearing, we all benefit from audiovisual speech perception. So when it comes to hearing, the Norwegian user organization HLF, they estimate about 14.5% of the Norwegian population have a hearing impairment that negatively impacts everyday activities. And they estimate that we are now 1 million hearing impaired Norwegians. Obviously, it's hard to set a firm number to these things. So if you look to Sweden, they estimate about 18.5% of the Swedish population suffer from a hearing impairment. And then if you look to Denmark, they're a little more conservative, saying about 800,000 Danes have a hearing impairment, and the number, obviously, as everywhere, is rising. So the numbers might be between 10 to 20%, maybe, of all people have some level of hearing impairment. If you look at the vision side of things, in Sweden, they estimate about 100,000 people with serious vision impairment. Obviously, there are very many levels of vision impairment. And in Norway, our user organization for the blind and vision impaired are estimating 320,000 Norwegians have a vision impairment, and almost 10,000 people are defined as legally blind in Norway. And then in Denmark, they have a survey that showed that 73,000 Danes define themselves as having a serious vision handicap. So that should give us a little bit of context in terms of how common vision and hearing impairment is. And what sort of demographic do we suppose are represented with combined sensory impairments? Well, it's obviously the elderly. You know, we have about 20% of the elderly population, people who are 70 years or older, they do have a hearing and vision impairment that cannot be cured. And by cured, we mean, you know, most hearing impairments cannot be cured. You know, there are sensorineural hearing losses, and you have to live with them. And a hearing aid isn't really a cure for hearing impairment. And likewise, in vision, there are a lot of vision impairments that cannot be fixed with simply putting on glasses. So that is quite a lot of people. Here are some examples of vision impairments that are common with age. So you have your cataract, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, and macular degeneration. That last one, I think, is the most common one, or the most common leading cause of blindness in that age group. It affects quite a lot of people. On that note, has anyone met this guy? Maybe some of you have been this guy. You know, as an audiologist, I ask my patients to take off their hearing aids, obviously, when we check their hearing, and also we take off the glasses because they can be uncomfortable with the headphones on. And then when we finish the tests, the hearing aids come back on, and then we start talking, and our patients, like, you can tell that they're struggling to hear, and so very soon the glasses will come on. So like intuitively, a lot of people realize that when they can see you, they can also hear you better. And I think that's really cool, because most of the time we don't really like to admit that our vision is important for our hearing, but truly it is. And despite knowing that our vision is important for our hearing, the vision profession and the hearing profession really have very little to do with each other, both historically speaking and now. But the funny thing is that the more I learn about vision impairment, the more I realize that this is exactly the same as in hearing impairments. You know, when I learn something about vision impairments, almost always I have a parallel, a direct link to something I already know about hearing. So we have much more in common than we might think. Despite of that, we really have very little to do with each other. This is one hospital where the hearing profession, the hearing central, is, as in a lot of places in Norway, the hearing central has a lot of really good equipment. It's filled with skilled people. And right across the hall, you have the vision central. But they really have very little, if any, actual collaboration between them, the two departments, despite of the fact that they have a lot of common patients. So, for example, you mentioned that you have Usher syndrome. And so you've been wearing hearing aids since you were a kid, and now you're also developing retinitis pigmentosa. So your field of vision is getting worse and worse, right? And so you might be going to the audiologist at the hearing central to talk about your challenges. And what are those challenges? Well, you struggle in social situations. You struggle in at the workplace or at your place of education. Maybe you have a big energy loss that takes a lot out of you. You know, all of the common consequences of a hearing impairment. So you talk about that. And then maybe by chance, a couple of weeks later, you have an appointment with the at the Vision Central. So you go there and you talk about the challenges that you have because of your vision impairment, which is what? You struggle at work. You have a energy loss because of your vision impairment. In a group situation, you struggle to know where to look. You know, you struggle to find people who are talking so you can look at them. And you know, that's something that we audiologists can help with. But despite that fact, there's very little collaboration. And so first you have to explain yourself to the audiologist, then you have to explain the same things to your vision professional. And that is the status for a lot of people with combined sensory losses. So what is this all really about? I want to quote Bente Ørbæk. She did a master's thesis about audiovisual speech perception in 2012, and she summarizes it very well, saying, "Our vision has a big influence on our hearing, and research show that when a hearing and vision impairment occur together, they enhance each other." And that's really the gist of it. But to demonstrate this, to make you understand, I'm going to show a video demonstration soon. Obviously, you know, speech is more than just sounds. You know, sounds become speech in the brain when a brain has been able to receive good enough information that it can interpret the sound as speech, recognize it as speech, and process it as speech. And obviously, our brains use all of our senses to interpret and understand the world. So what you'll be hearing now is a demonstration of the McGurk effect. all you really have to do in this video is try to pay attention to the sounds that I'm making and decide for yourself which sounds you are actually hearing. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Isn't that weird? Like, even when you know, and by the way, this was the exact same sound file for the entire video. It was just repeated. The only difference between the videos was the face I was making. So even when you know which sound you're actually hearing, you can't hear it. As long as your eyes are focusing on the video, your eyes will decide which of the two sounds you're actually hearing. And that's kind of weird. And so obviously observing the speaker's face has a drastic effect on our perception of what has been said. And it seems like when our ears and eyes disagree, like in this video, the eyes has a tendency to win. Or sometimes a new fictive compromise is made. So for example, if you have a video of a person who seems to say ka with a K, and the sound you actually hear is pa with a P, then that has a tendency to become something completely different. It tends to become ta with T, which is what you hear, despite the fact that you haven't seen or heard that T. It's just produced in the brain as a result of the combination between what you see and what you hear. So obviously, visual information affects our speech perception. And then you can ask a question, but why? Why would it even begin to include our eyes in what is normally thought of as a purely auditory situation, which is speech? You know, why is the brain using a lot of energy on bringing the eyes into this at all? Well, one thing is for sure, and that is the fact that our vision is our primary sense. Of all the senses, that is the sense that our brain spends the most time on, the most space on inside of the brain. And it's very easy to see when you see these fMRI pictures of people being stimulated with various stimuli and seeing how the brain sort of like lights up when it responds to tactile senses, when it responds to sounds. If you know, the auditory cortex will sort of like glow up a little bit when it hears sounds. If it's a familiar sound, then it sort of like spreads to the memory. But when our brain receives vision, like rich video, you know, the whole brain will just light up like a Christmas tree. It's very, very clear that our vision is very important for our brain. Actually, about half of our mental energy consumption is related to visual perception, visual processing. But then you can ask, why? Why is vision so important for the brain? There are a few perspectives on this. So first, from an evolutionary standpoint, the eyes are much, much, much older than our ears, you know, evolutionary speaking. like this little guy in the on the cover of this magazine. You know, he doesn't have eyes like we do, but he has photoreceptors on his skin. He has a center of photoreceptors that enables it to know if it's day or night, to know which way is up and down, and it gives him a little bit of an advantage over other organisms that do not have those traits. And there's even a theory to suggest that we probably have had a sense of vision, and by we I mean like life on Earth. We've had a sense of vision before we even had a brain. So the theory is that our brain is an information processing organ. You know, it takes information and it processes information. But before you have any information to process, like if you're a very, very simple organism, then you don't really need a brain. So the theory is that only when we developed senses like vision, like light sensing abilities, only then did we have information to actually process. And so vision really is a very, very old invention compared to the ears. Another perspective on this is that visual information is very reliable. And the brain will almost always prioritize the most reliable information. You know, seeing is believing, right? If I see a person, even from afar, and I recognize that person, then I'm pretty sure, right? I could probably recognize the voice too. You know, if it's a person that I know, I could recognize the voice. I could probably even like maybe feel it with my hands. And who knows, maybe I could even smell it. But really, you know, the vision is the most primary sense and the one that we rely on and trust. And the brain doesn't really have any desire to pull in other senses when the vision has already delivered an answer. A third perspective on this is that communicating through body language is much older than speaking, you know, verbal communication. And our own language may have developed from facial expressions and gestures before turning into the oral language that we have now. And that makes sense if you think about it, because, you know, life on Earth, we've been communicating visually for like hundreds of millions of years. You know, even like shellfish, like crayfish and lobsters, who has been around and unchanged since before the dinosaurs. You know, they've been communicating visually. You know, they hold up their claws, you know, and they compare which has the bigger claw, and a lot of communication happens visually. So that is one perspective of why vision is of such importance to our brain. So the question then is really why not? Why shouldn't the brain use our eyes when the infrastructure has already been there and when it clearly enhances our ability to communicate? Another point here is that the brain loves to store and process visual information, and it's really, really, really good at it. We don't even realize how good our brain is at storing visual information. There's been some research where they put people in front of a TV screen and they show them thousands of random pictures, just a few seconds each. And then those same people can come back several weeks later and see pictures again. And some pictures are old, like they've seen them before, and some pictures are new and they haven't seen them before. You can remember which pictures you have seen and which ones are new with like 90-something% accuracy. It's crazy how good your brain is at like remembering visual stimuli. Even when they tested these people a year after, they still had an 85% correct recall of which pictures they have seen and which they haven't seen 1 year ago. So that's absolutely crazy. Imagine if our hearing was like that. Unfortunately, about 90% of what you hear me say today is going to be gone way before the weekend is over. Obviously, 90%, I don't know. But overall, of all the information that we do receive orally, through our ears, is pretty much gone very, very, very soon. My hope, though, is that by showing you a lot of pictures and videos, that I'll be able to increase the percentage from 10 to maybe up to 65% by including audio-visual information. So by including the eyes and the visual cortex, you really do remember a lot more than if you just hear something. All right. And as an audiologist, as somebody who works with patients, this makes sense. Yeah, 90% of what we hear is forgotten. I believe it. And Robert Margolis, he had an interesting article in the Hearing Journal in 2004, where he discussed, what do your patients remember? And he had looked into the research looking at this. And he summarizes like this. Depending on conditions, 40 to 80% may be forgotten immediately. However, of the information that patients do recall, they remember about half incorrectly. So half is forgotten immediately, and half of what is remembered is wrong. So that's pretty terrible, right? Half of everything you tell your patient is forgotten immediately, and half of what remains is just wrong. But that makes sense too. We know that a lot of people are seriously hurt or killed because the doctor told them how to take the medication, and still, even though we know that this is super important, life-saving information, it's still hard to remember. So it seems like our ears aren't really made or designed to receive a lot of complex information. The ears aren't connected to our brain like our vision is. And that has and should have consequences. Another thing that controls what we see and hear and perceive is our attention. We see what we expect to see, and we hear what we expect to hear. And context is extremely important for what we perceive. For example, take a visual illusion, like this one, classic illusion. So half of you will see a rabbit, and the other half is surprised that I didn't say duck. And what I've learned is that the case isn't that half of you are duck people and the other half, are rabbit people that only sees rabbits. Your brain sort of just like takes whatever is the closest. So it sees a picture that could be two different things, and it just picks one. It just picks the one that sort of is the most available and decides that's what this is. This is a rabbit, or this is a duck. So this one is old and very well known, but this one, even when I tell you that all of these lines are absolutely straight, all of the vertical lines are completely vertical and the horizontal lines are horizontal, and all of the squares are absolutely square, it's still almost impossible to actually see that they are that they are straight, because they look like they're not straight. And even if we measure this, and make sure that they're all straight, our brains still will not allow us to actually see what is in front of us. So the actual truth is like kept from us. We can't access it because of these mechanisms in our brain that controls our reality. This sort of like, it has to be like this. We have a limited mental budget. All of our senses are competing for the same resources. So the brain needs them to simplify, to turn the world into black and white, and jump to conclusions, basically. And it's those mechanisms that optical illusions like this play on. The +7 test, that's a commonly used test in attention research. It's a very simple test. So you start out with a number, and then you add 7, and then you add 7, and you add 7. So if you start with 4, it's going to be 11, 18, 25, 32. And if you do this as fast as you can, you basically, a gorilla could walk into the room and you wouldn't notice. Like all of your mental capacity is completely absorbed by this task. And there's really no room left over for even basic things. And that explains, why the brain has to simplify things and jump to conclusion simply to preserve energy. And then you also have the concept of conscious or subconscious attention. Like, have you noticed how when you decide to buy a new car, suddenly everybody has that car? You've never seen it before, or you never noticed it before, but suddenly everybody has that car, and it's super weird. The cars have always been there, but your brain hasn't really had a reason for you to actually notice. The cocktail party effect. You're at a party, lots of people are talking around you. You can't really hear what people around you are saying because you're talking to somebody specific, but suddenly you hear your name mentioned, behind your back, and suddenly you turn to see, what it was. And that's interesting because we haven't really heard anything. We haven't heard what people have been saying around us, but clearly the brain has been monitoring everything you've heard. And when the brain hears something that triggers the consciousness, then suddenly that information is provided to us. So I have another example of this. So this will be a challenge. You are now going to hear two different sounds. It's a recording of myself saying a very short sentence. But to make it hard, I've sort of degraded the sentence. I've added echo. It's very bad quality, okay? But you get one shot at figuring out what am I saying now, okay? Give it your best shot.
Do you hear with the brain?
Okay. I can't see you holding up any hands, but I'm assuming that most of you thought that was hard or impossible to hear, right? So I'm going to play you the clean recording.
You hear with the brain.
That's right. You hear with the brain. And now I'm going to go back to the first recording, and I'm going to play that same file again. And try now and listen.
Do you hear with the brain? Do you hear with the brain?
It's not crazy how much easier that was to hear. And obviously, it's easy when you know what to listen for. But it's hard to. It's almost surprising how clearly you can actually hear the first sentence now, despite the fact that it was almost impossible to hear just 1 minute ago. And that's because the brain has an autocorrect function. It anticipates what comes next when we hear speech, which is why we don't really have to hear every single sound that we hear, because our brain has an amazing ability to fill in information that's missing. And this is based on what the brain already knows about language, about the voice of the person you're speaking to, about the topic that you're speaking about. When you have a hearing impairment and you meet a new person, maybe that person has a different dialect, a different way of speaking than what you're used to. And it's really hard to understand that person in the beginning. But after a while, your brain just starts to realize how that person speaks, what sort of words that person uses, and it just gets easier and easier. And after a while, it's not hard at all. And then it's sort of difficult to even realize that this used to be hard, and now it's just normal, because our brains build up infrastructure to enable us to interpret what we hear. And that's what's happening here in this example. So here we have a picture of audiovisual integration in the brain. When we take a simple sentence like, Amy likes her cat, and we present that without any context, just that sentence, then it gets a little hard. If you have an auditory only condition, so you only hear that sentence, then, if you weren't paying attention very well, if the speech was a little weird, or if there was a little bit of background noise, it's almost impossible to know if it was Amy likes her cat, or hat, or pat, or cap, it could be anything. Maybe not mat. You see, they grayed out mat because the M sound is a little too different from that C sound. But if you have an audio-visual signal, so you have the sound plus the actual face to look at, then the audio-visual integration makes sure that you're only left with the right answer. You're only left with cat, because intuitively we know that it cannot be cap. That B motion is too different. The P motion is too different, and so you're left with only the correct alternative, and that saves us a lot of energy. It means that we are able to participate easier and use less energy in social situations. All right, some numbers, just a few, to show you just how pronounced this effect is. This is a test of speech in noise. And what this graph shows is that when you only hear sounds, then with little noise, you hear very well. And with a lot of noise, you hear nothing at all, right? And check this out. This line shows the same test, only it's audio-visual. So for the same noise level, you jump almost 60% just by adding the picture or the video of the speaker's face. And that corresponds to a 10 decibel improvement in signal to noise ratio, which is a huge, enormous improvement. And adding the video, it obviously improved the performance a lot, but it also lowered the response time. So you took less time to answer, and it increased endurance. You were able to keep it up for longer because you didn't have to spend as much energy in the test. And then Bente Ørbekk, that I mentioned before, she decided to test amongst our users here in Eikholt, people who have combined sensory loss, deafblindness. Is this something that they too can benefit from, or is this something that only works with people with good vision? And her results were that people scored significantly better when both hearing and vision could contribute to speech perception. So for these 12 people with combined sensory losses, they all scored better, up to 32% better with vision compared to just hearing. Okay. So, most of us, we can't really understand speech using only lip reading, but all of us are able to extract some useful information from speech cues. And what's interesting is that this isn't just the mouth. When we have improved speech perception, it's not just the brain looking at the mouth area, but it's actually the whole face. And this increases our endurance and our reliability, and it makes it much easier to function in noisy social settings. And one of the most famous and first studies to look at just how big this effect was the shower study. Here, they took just a little control group of people with normal hearing, and then 14 young people with severe hearing impairments. And then they checked how did these people, how were they affected by a visual impairment, like a fake visual impairment. And the way they faked the visual impairment was by putting the person saying sentences behind a shower curtain or like a shower door. Not specifically the one from this picture, but similar, you get the point. And the further away you are behind the shower screen, the more blurry you become, right? So that's how they simulated visual impairments. And they saw that people were able to benefit from watching the person speaking down to a lower limit. And that lower limit is this limit. So only when your vision is so bad that you can only see that largest letter of this classic vision acuity test, only then do you no longer benefit from watching the person that you are listening to. But for all of these other levels of visual acuity, you score better when you can have access to the speaker's face. So that's really cool. And how does this then work with elderly people? Because, you know, you could be forgiven for thinking that maybe this is something that requires a young, healthy brain, you know, maybe old brains aren't as good at doing this, at extracting information from speech or from vision. But this test from 2004 took 77 elderly people and compared them. And what they found was that for this group, adding visual information gave an average increase of almost 30%. And the conclusion was that the majority of older people gained significant benefits from watching the speaker's face, irrespective of their visual impairment. So this is an effect that also works for an elderly population, not just for young people. And just to drive that point home, here we have a comparison between 16 young people and 16 elderly people with normal hearing and vision. And here they tested speech perception using only sound, and then sound and video, where the video was normal and clear, and then audio and video, where the video was slightly blurry, and then in the end, very blurry, to see if there was any difference in these two groups of young and elderly. Like, so they sort of like put them in a little competition. Who is going to score the most in these conditions? And what they found was that for audio only, young people won. And when they added video, both young people and old people scored much better than when they just had audio. And look at this, the advantage that the young people had here is almost gone now. The elderly population has sort of like almost equalized with the young people. And also for these blurry videos, especially this very blurry video, we see that young people and elderly people scored much better than when they just had sound. And still, the difference between elderly and young isn't as big as it was with audio only. So visual information gives us greatly improved speech understanding, even when the visual information is degraded. So I will now put you guys through a little test, okay? So this is going to be a demonstration of your own audio-visual speech perception. What you'll be seeing is myself in front of the camera, and I'll be saying short sentences. And these are the conditions. I have added noise to make it suitably hard, because the whole point is that it's not good, it can't be too easy, it can't be too hard. Hopefully I found a good balance. So short sentences, and then I have added a progressive visual impairment. So you guys are going to suffer from reduced visual acuity, and you're also going to suffer from RP, retinitis pigmentosa, by the end of it. And your task is simply, to the best of your ability, try to understand what I'm saying. Try to repeat for yourself, maybe silently, what you are hearing. And try to pay attention to how you are affected by your vision. The level of my voice and the level of the background noise remains the same throughout the entire video.
The match is about to start. She sold her old car. The little mouse
mouse was hungry. I planted this tree last year. My mom is making soup today. The truck is over. That's my cousin. They have 2 boys. People started to leave. Where are they from? She found her brother. Would you like a pet? My father bought this. The cat belongs to this chair. They climbed the tree. They're both retired. The old bloods were gone. These potatoes are big. A man opened the door. The dog ate his food. I don't think he's coming. What was that cost? The children sat at the table. These letters are too small. The contract is signed. No one is hungry. How many are you? 4 is wrong. Farmers, that is cows. We can't choose. My daughter has that. Remember to say goodbye. The boy was hiding. It will be sunny tomorrow. The police drove by. I don't know what to do. It was a board day. How did that go? Hopefully, you noticed how much easier it got towards the end when your vision came back, and you noticed how much easier it was to hear what I was saying. But the noise level and the sound level remained the same throughout the video. And I suppose you also noticed that even though, when the vision was very, very bad, when it was very blurry, you still got a lot of useful information. You still, even when you weren't actually able to see much of the face, you were still able to know when I was getting ready to say something. You can tell I'm looking up from my script and into the camera. And so you got a little bit of information about when I was about to start talking. And so even with very, very bad vision, you can still get extra and valuable information from your visuals. So we're on to the end here. We're going to talk a little bit about what this should mean for everybody who works with sensory losses. We know that people with sensory losses, they have the same needs, the same wants as the rest of us, right? The same basic needs. We need social participation. We need to feel like we're included in society. We need access to work and to participate in education. And we need people around us with knowledge and who can support us, right? That's the most important parts of our lives. And so when people come to me, am I using the right tests? Am I using the tests that actually tell me how these people are performing in the situations that matter the most to them. You know, a lot of people are only tested with what is currently the gold standard for hearing testing, which is the pure tone audiometry. And a lot of people, if they do get speech tests, they are either one-syllable words like man, cat, dog, or spondaic words. And often these are performed in quiet without hearing aids. So with headphones on and no hearing aids, meaning that they really lack, you really can't transfer the results from this test onto real life. You know, the test results don't really tell you a whole lot about how your hearing works in your life. And, you know, pure tone tests, they might show normal hearing function for people with a lot of different hearing impairments, you know, like auditory processing disorder, auditory neuropathy, hidden hearing losses, cochlear synaptopathy, and several others too, aren't really discovered purely in a normal audiogram. So what we need to be mindful of are we using the right tests? Are we actually testing functional hearing? Or are we just doing clinical diagnostic testing? That's two different things. So functional tests of hearing ability, you know, they exist. We have them. Something we've been using a lot here in Eikholt is the so-called Iowa test. So that is a audiovisual speech perception test where you are looking at a screen and repeating what 4 different people are saying. The last year, I have been heavily involved in a project which is developing a new audiovisual speech perception test in Norwegian. Because the old test that you just saw a picture of is a DVD-based with pretty mediocre video quality, and it's got a lot of shortcomings. So for the last year, I've been working on developing this new test where you are looking at a screen and repeating sentences that are presented with or without a picture. So we get a clear number stating just how much of your speech perception is due to your vision and how much is due to your hearing. And this test is very easy to administer from a computer-based interface, and it'll be ready sometime next year. So that was just a little bit of information about that, a little teaser about things to come. And now to end, these are the 10% that I want you to remember. If you're going to forget 90%, remember these 10. So point number 1, speech perception is vastly improved when you can use the eyes as well as the ears. Many hearing aid users also have a vision impairment. There's a huge overlap between our 2 groups. So it should be natural and normal to think about hearing and vision rehabilitation together as one process, one rehabilitation process. Because if we recognize that speech perception is an audiovisual process, then this gives us a lot of valuable tools to help people reach their goals. And you know, the goals of our patients is usually the same. It's to be able to participate socially and in society to the best of their ability. And I think we can get there if we have the right focus and treat communication as an audiovisual process. And that's it for me. If you have any questions that I'm not able to answer now in the next 3 minutes, feel free to email me. I'll be happy to take any emails and to answer any questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Rolf. Now I see that there are questions because I wanted to say something in forehand. I need to change my, so I can see the question. Because I want just to start with one question of, you started to say about the very new and fancy at the hospital, and it was interesting. Have you seen any changes for the different clinics, not at that hospital, but around, that there are starting to be collaboration in more sentence than it has been? How can you see the changes?
Well, it's kind of a big question. What it boils down to ultimately are individuals. You know,
Yeah.
you might meet an individual, whether that be a hearing care professional or a vision professional, who have a passion for these things, and they might be able to help. But on a systemic level, it's very hard.
Yeah.
What is good is that we have more and more focus on functional tests.
Yeah.
So that is something that is good, and I think that's probably the one way forward, is to be able to move away, not eliminate, the clinical old tests, but to be able to incorporate new tests that have an ability to actually predict how you are going to perform, in real life, and that goes both for hearing and vision. By the way, I don't know why I'm blurry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. And we have many applause here, and the participants who have been joining really think this is interesting. And thank you so much. And I have heard you before, but it gives you new thoughts. And as you said, I have, of course, forgotten the 19% from the first time, and now maybe I can add 10 more. But because you can feel it in your body when you listen to you and when you see the videos, and then you get reminded of it one more time. Fantastic presentation, people say here. And I will just, if you have 30 seconds, you can say something about the tactile support, because now we have been talking a lot about the vision and here, of course, that's what's the aim. Is something you want to add about the tactile sense during to this?
Yeah, so obviously, like I said in the beginning, the brain really doesn't care like how it gets information. As long as it does get information, it's happy to do the most out of it. I remember looking at a TED talk some years ago where they put tactile vibrations onto clothes, and they converted sound to tactile vibrations on the body, and they had people wear this vest for like weeks, and eventually they were able to start recognizing words, not by hearing them, but by feeling them on the body. And so they were able to like pass a speech perception test, like simple words. They were able to feel which words they were, just by the sounds vibrating on the body. And that's super interesting. And it just shows that the brain really doesn't care. If you have vision, okay, great. If you have hearing, awesome. If you are left with, your tactile sense, the brain is happy to make the most of that sense. And so it's just super important to include every possible stimuli, every possible sense.
Good. Before we end, I don't know, I haven't been spoken with you about this, but we have the conference, the Nordic conference in Tampere next year in September, and you are in the scientific planning committee, and maybe we will hear something from you there. We will meet you there as well, so we can catch you and ask questions, even if you won't have a presentation, but I hope that you will. Thank you, Rolf. And I would like to close this webinar with something that you have been written in your book. It says that the brain turns out to be very flexible and very hungry for stimuli that help it to make sense of its surroundings. Just how or in what format the stimulus arrives to the brain seems to be of secondary importance. Over time, the brain will learn to use the information in a way that helps make sense of the world. I think that is a very good ending of this webinar and this webinar series for this year. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating, and I wish you a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year, and then we meet each other next year again. Take care and goodbye.